Okay, so I cut myself off there, but I was talking about methodologies in relation to like this fictional Common Core thesis and claims I came up with in my head to exemplify the point that you can organize your evidence within your CSE paragraphs a number of different ways, one of them being methodologies. So you can group similar ways that the study was done together, or you can group similar results together. So let's say one study found a bunch of evidence that was very similar, but other studies actually found conflicting evidence against those other studies. You can organize evidence like that. You got to organize evidence. You can't dump truck it on your reader. They'll get kind of annoyed, and then you won't have good bone structure, right? So right now we still have this gun control argument up on the screen here, and this gun control argument is a refutation argument. So I've talked about 4 ways now that you can organize your evidence in your CSE: by methodology, by findings, what were the findings, what were the results, by refutation, which is what this example is, or by timeline. I showed you an example of timeline, and we're going to continue with this example of refutation. So you saw the first CSE, it was pretty short. Let's look at the second CSE. One of the mainstays of anti-gun control advocates' argument is their interpretation of the Second Amendment to the Constitution. Okay, so that was the opposing viewpoint, and then they go into their however. Now that's not enough ink. That's not enough ink for this. You got to give them more space, talk about the Constitution a little more, really support their argument so your reader's like, I'm on board with their side, and then do your however, and then do your however. Okay, but let's look at their however findings and maybe how they organized them and see if we can see even further logic. So they organize this in refutation, the other one side, then the other side, but looks like there's a lot of evidence and data in here, right here. Is there any logic to this evidence and data? I don't know. Let's see. However, this interpretation is based on past conditions, outdated attitudes, and faulty reasoning, all of which destroy its credibility. So it sounds like then they're telling you how they're going to organize it. They're going to first go into past conditions, then they're going to go into outdated attitudes, then they're going to go into faulty reasoning. Okay, the amendment states a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state and the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The anti-gun control interpretation is that any American should be able to own any firearm they choose. Oh, so they did give it some more ink here. So this argument gets some more ink right here. So the anti-gun control interpretation, I would have liked to seen some authorial introduction here, maybe talk about whatever group Shields belongs to. Great in-text citation. I know the student's moving on to somebody else, either themselves or another author, because I see an in-text citation and you wouldn't put one unless you were doing it right after a quote or trying to indicate that you're moving on in opinion. But I'm not seeing at the beginning of that in-text or beginning of this sentence, I'm not seeing any authorial attribution to this clear opinion and this very big opinion. So I think that's missing. This interpretation hinges on the word militia, which they believe signifies individuals rather than a collective. Again, need some credibility there, authorial attribution, kind of your midterm, what the heck would be the most important things to introduce to your reader in researching the source needs a lot more. So if they started doing that, see how short the CSE is, and the student was probably like, I'm done. No, you're not done. This should be like 3 pages long. You just like got your bones down here. This is draft number 1, it looks like, to this instructor. You got a lot more to do. All right, so anyway, moving on. These 2 facts they put there, and they said they were going to say past conditions. Maybe that's what they mean by these 2 facts. They read from the Constitution, and then they talked about a militia rather than a collective. However, the Supreme Court has ruled on 5 separate occasions that the Second Amendment was intended to protect members of a state militia from being disarmed by the federal government. And then, that's a really good fact. Also, the American Bar Association stated in 1975 that every federal court decision involving the amendment has given the amendment a collective militia interpretation. The militia in question is what we know today as the National Guard. In the mid-1970s, the National Rifle Association itself issued a pamphlet discussing the amendment, which concluded that because of the judicial precedent, then the constitutional argument is of limited practical unity. This is a great writing. Look at this quote and how this quote goes right into the sentence, goes right into the quote. Before you learned, you always put a comma if you see the word like says before it, says and then comma. But if you say that, or if you could take away the quotes and the sentence still stands, then in that scenario you have done it correctly without the says or said and comma. In addition to that, so remember the rule, if you can take away the quotes and the sentences still totally make sense, then you don't need like said or said comma. But also notice the double quotes here. So you have a quote here, and then this student actually did a singlet, and then they do a singlet and a double at the end too, right here. This is intelligent because that means Shields is actually, this author Shields was quoting someone in the source, so it becomes a quote within a quote. Whenever you have a quote within a quote, it would be like doublet, whatever Shields wrote, blah, 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 and then whoever Shields quoted is a singlet. It's right here. So by just doing the singlets there, I'm clearly seeing that Shields is quoting someone and they're using the Shields quote in their paper. Anyway, so let's see. So they said interpretation of past conditions, outdated attitudes. We haven't really gotten to attitudes yet. Aside from the argument of over semantics, the fact remains the Second Amendment was written at a time Americans lived in fear of peacetime quartering of British troops and potential federal dictatorship. These conditions simply no longer exist, therefore, so that's what they're talking about, fear, outdated attitudes. Now let's talk about faulty reasoning. Let's see if they go into that. Aside from the argument, we read that these conditions simply no longer exist. Therefore, because of the anti-gun control interpretation of the Second Amendment is so converted, its origins so outdated, it cannot be used as a viable option to gun control. So that's what they were talking about in their faulty reasoning. So, this is their claim. Their claim actually organizes their CSC, which is really intelligent. Here's what I'm going to talk about this is all my claim and also my organizational structure for my CSC. And then at the end of it, they just go over that last bit of their CSC organizational structure. This is a really intelligent writing, missing a lot of stuff that you guys know about. Their own analysis is kind of in here, pretty good in here, but they're missing a lot of authorial attribution, credibility stuff. Pretty good CSC. Notice the organizational structure of it. You have to, and I don't know what this is for you, for your specific case, organize your evidence in some way. This is their evidence. How are you going to splash it down on the paper? You can't dump truck it. So figure that out. How are you organizing your evidence? They organize it by right here. They say how they're going to do it right in their claim. All right. Check your papers. I'm going to be looking for that.